Good evening, everyone. My name is Allison Hagan. I'm the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Montana. I wanted to welcome you all and thank you for joining NARAL and University of Montana Students for Choice to celebrate the 35th anniversary of Roe v. Wade with Jessica Valenti. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with NARAL Pro-Choice Montana, we are the state's largest grassroots organization dedicated solely to protecting reproductive rights, and we've been working to protect choice in Montana for more than 30 years. Our vision for Montana is communities in which every pregnancy is wanted, every child is welcomed, and every woman is respected. I hope that you've had a chance to check out our table and sign up for more information about NARAL and Students for Choice. We have a historic year ahead of us, and we're going to need your involvement if we're going to protect privacy and reproductive rights in Montana come November. We are especially excited to be hosting this event with the University of Montana Students for Choice. One of the reasons we chose to have the event in Missoula and to invite Jessica Valenti, a young feminist, to be our speaker is to recognize the amazing work that young women are already doing in Montana to protect reproductive rights. NARAL has hired campus organizers at U of M for the past 4 years, and they've been doing really amazing work educating, mobilizing their peers around the threats to access to birth control, medically accurate sex education, affordable reproductive health care, and access to abortion care. Just this past semester, Students for Choice collected over 1,000 signatures on a petition to Montana senators to fix the birth control pricing crisis, which has caused the cost of many methods of birth control to more than double on college campuses and family planning clinics. U of M Students for Choice gathered more names for NARAL's Choice Action Network, which is our email activist network, than any other Students for Choice group in the entire country last semester. Working with these young leaders is one of the highlights of my job, and I couldn't be more proud of them for the work that they do. And I'd like to turn the microphone over to the current leader of the University of Montana Students for Choice, Letty Limbach.
Hello, my name is Letty Limbach, and I'm the campus organizer for Students for Choice, as you just heard. Students for Choice is extremely excited to have Jessica Valenti here at the University of Montana. But before I get to why that is, I wanted to thank ASUM and President Dennison for their very generous support in bringing Jessica to campus. We definitely could not have done it without them. I also wanted to thank the members of Students for Choice's task force, especially Susie, Eliza, Carrie, Erin, Sapphire, Jennifer, and Andrew for all their help. The event would not have been the same without them, so thank you guys so very much. Now on to a couple logistical items. The cards that were handed out at the door and will be handed out during the speech are for the question and answer session following Jessica's speech. If you have a question, just write it on the card, pass it to the end of the row, and a volunteer will come grab it from you. Also, this event will be videotaped by Missoula County Access Television as part of its Media Assistance Grants Program to nonprofit organizations. For more information about the grant program, please contact MCAT at 542-6228. Jessica Valenti is the founder and executive editor of the popular blog Feministing.com. She also recently wrote a book called Frontal Feminism, A Young Woman's Guide to Why Feminism Matters, which is available for purchase in the University Center bookstore. At a time when CI 100, the constitutional initiative that would define life as beginning at conception, is gathering steam, it is critical for young women, especially here in Montana, to realize that feminism is not a dirty word or an outdated, no longer relevant concept. Here's where women like Jessica Valenti step in. Ms. Valenti presents feminism in a way that not only relates directly to women our age, but appeals to women our age. So without further ado, on behalf of Students for Choice and NARAL Pro-Choice Montana, I would like to welcome feminist and women's rights activist Jessica Valenti.
Hi. Is my voice too loud for the microphone? Is that okay? Can we have another round of applause for NARAL Pro-Choice Montana and Students for Choice for the amazing work they do on behalf of women? And thank you guys so much for bringing me here. It's awesome. Is anyone else tired from staying up all night watching the returns? Yeah. And nothing really all that exciting happens, so. And thanks for kind of dealing with us while we went through some of the technical difficulties. You guys don't like Max too much, it seems. So before I get into the kind of work I do and why I think feminism is so important, especially to young people, I thought I would start by telling you kind of a personal story. This is something that happened not so long ago that always serves as a reminder to me, at least, why feminism is so important and why the work that feminists are doing is so necessary. As Letty mentioned, I run a website called Feministing.com. How many people have read Feministing or know of Feministing? Just have, yay! Okay, good stuff. So a little over a year ago, I was invited with about 10 other progressive bloggers to go to an informal lunch with former President Bill Clinton. And it was kind of like a lead up to Hillary's run. They were trying to get some influence with the bloggers. Like any good New York City gal, I fretted a little bit about what to wear, and I was a little freaked out, and first big scary meeting, but I thought I did a pretty good job. The meeting was fun and great, and at the end we had a couple of minutes for some group photos with the president. Does anyone already know what I'm getting to? Anyone who's like a blog person may know what I'm getting to. Okay. So after the meeting, naturally a bunch of people blogged about it. And this included people who were at the meeting, people who weren't at the meeting. And when they blogged about it, they included some of the group photos. While I was reading the coverage of the event, I started to notice in comments that people were talking about the way I looked. And here are just, oop, God, if this thing doesn't kill me. Here are some of the comments, hello, that I started to see. So this is from different websites. Who's the intern directly in front of him with the black hair? No mention of after dinner cigars. The last one is my favorite. This is why plain girls go to Trekkie conventions. So yeah, it was charming, as you can see. A lot of these actually came from one site in particular, which is a blog by a law professor and sometimes New York Times columnist, who I won't mention by name because I don't like giving her site any traffic whatsoever. So I went to her site and I commented kind of sarcastically in the comments, like, how nice is it that young women aren't being judged on their looks anymore? And she was pissed that I went to comments and said something. So the woman who runs the site decided to dedicate a whole post to how I was acting inappropriately in this picture and how I was dressed inappropriately. And the title of the post was, "Let's take a closer look at those breasts." Yeah. And this is some of the stuff, and this is, again, New York Times columnist, law professor. This is some of the stuff that she wrote. Jessica should have worn a beret. Blue dress would have been good too. You would think by kind of the comments that she was getting on her site and that she wrote that I was in a bikini top kind of giving Clinton a lap dance. But this is the very, very controversial photo. Just wearing a crew neck Gap sweater, probably one of the most modest clothing items I own, actually. And this was just the beginning of what became actually a huge flap in the political blogosphere. They actually called it boobgate. So yes, it's my claim to fame. If you do a search on boobgate in my name, this is what you're going to come up with. And hundreds of blogs started writing about it, whether or not I was dressed and acting inappropriately, how whorish I was or not. I mean, and the comments got very nasty. MSNBC picked it up. Time magazine wanted to do a story on it. And the blogger who blogs about this did a podcast saying that the only reason I possibly could have been invited to this lunch was because Bill Clinton wanted to meet me and be stood up with me. And as big of an ego as I sometimes have, I don't think that former presidents are necessarily going out of their way to meet me. So after I got over kind of the personal outrage I felt after this, and it was literally, after spending a weekend reading hundreds of comments about how slutty I was and how I was clearly trying to, push my breasts up into the former president's face and just ridiculous stuff, just for standing in the picture, I started to think about the larger implications of this, so-called controversy. And I realized this is why feminism is so important. And this is why it still matters. I was targeted because I was young. I was targeted because of the way I looked. I was targeted because I was a woman. And I think to some extent I was also targeted because I was a feminist. And, you know, attacking my appearance, and I think probably a lot of women in the audience can relate to this, attacking my appearance was a deliberate way to remind me that no matter how much work I do, no matter how much I accomplish, that like all younger women, I'm there to be looked at and I'm there to be judged. That that's what my worth is, that that's what I can offer the world. And really, it was a way to put me in my place and to remind me that I don't belong there. So I hope you guys don't mind me going off on this little tangent, but I think it's a really interesting example, personal example, of why feminism is so important. But unfortunately, no matter how necessary feminism is, whether you're talking about my story or whether you're talking about your own stories, it's still pretty denigrated. Whether it's the media saying feminism is dead, which they like to say often, or conservatives saying feminism is destroying families or that it's irrelevant, we never really seem to get an accurate picture of what feminism is all about and what feminists are actually doing. And the thing is, I truly believe that most young women are feminists. They have feminist values, but they're just too afraid to use the word feminist. I'm betting this is something you guys have heard a lot. I don't know if you can read the little cartoon there. I'm not a feminist, but I believe in equal pay. I'm not a feminist, but I believe in access to birth control. I'm not a feminist, but I want to fight against rape. I think we're all familiar with this, women expressing feminist ideals, but then feeling the need to put that disclaimer in there because they don't want to be associated with feminism. And I think what the problem is, why so many young women especially, but all women really, shy away from the word, is that it has a huge image problem, right? I mean, we've really internalized all of these very anti-feminist messages. What do people think of when they think of the word feminist? You could shout it out at me. I know that you've heard hairy. There's one. What else? Lesbian. Bra burners. And not that there's anything wrong with those things. The bra burning I may warn against to keep yourself safe. But, you know, the amazing thing about these stereotypes is that they still exist because they've been around for a really long time. These are some cartoons from the suffrage era, and I think it's really interesting because it's the same kind of message, you know? It's like the women beating up on the poor, emasculated man, and who's gonna wear the pants, you know, what will men wear when women wear the pants? But what's interesting is that, you know, these kind of stereotypes serve a really specific purpose. Telling women that only ugly man-haters are feminists is really strategic, and it's really smart, because it's a great way to keep young women away from feminism. This next image, I did a Google image search on feminist, and that's what I came up with. And as you can see, this is my favorite because she kind of embodies all of the anti-feminist stereotypes. The bra burning, the hairy underarms, Birkenstocks. I didn't wear my Birkenstocks today, though I have to own up to having some. But what's, you know, we can laugh at it, but what's truly kind of terrible is that these really played out, antiquated notions of what feminism is what a lot of young women, that's all they know about feminism. That's all that really comes to their mind when they think about feminism, that it's ugly, that it's unpopular, that it's uncool. But I think it's important to recognize that obviously there's an awful lot of effort being put into discrediting feminism, and there's a reason for that. You know, if people didn't see feminism as a threat, if they didn't see feminism as powerful, they wouldn't spend so much time trying to denigrate it. Something I like to say, because you know, always see the feminism is dead stories out in the media. If feminism is dead, why are they trying so hard to kill it? You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And the truth is, I believe that if young women were exposed to the truth about feminism and what it's really all about, that they'd be much more likely to identify with it. And that's really what I try to do with my work, is to make feminism accessible to young women. And that really all started with Feministing, which I know that some of you read, and that's the website. And for people who are wondering about the logo, we get some flack for the logo every once in a while. She's a mudflap girl who is flipping you off. And the reason behind that, because we do get a lot of questions, especially from older seasoned feminists, who are upset that the logo kind of represents the normal beauty standard and all that. We wanted to take a traditional sexist image and subvert it and kind of turn it around and have her give a nice FU to the beauty standards that she represents. So that's what that's all about. I started the site about 4 years ago when I was working at a national women's organization. And I was really excited and idealistic about like going to work for this organization out of grad school. I was like, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna be working for the mainstream movement. This is gonna be amazing. And then I got there and they gave a lot of lip service to younger women, but they weren't necessarily listening to what we had to say. We certainly were not in decision-making positions. We certainly weren't at the table when important decisions were made. So, and also around the same time, you know, the media started going crazy with all the Girls Gone Wild stories. Like, the girls are promiscuous, watch out, like girls are having sex. And what I noticed was that they would never really interview young women outside of like the Girls Gone Wild set. Like, they never really wanted to listen to what young women had to say. So my boss at the time had a blog called Liberal Oasis, which was a progressive blog, and he kind of convinced me to start feministing, even though I had never really, to be honest, read blogs, or I wasn't involved in the world at all. But I remember at the time doing a Google search on young feminist and young feminism, and the first page that came up was a page from Now from 1996. And it was just incredible to me because I knew that there were young feminists out there, but we weren't necessarily being represented online. Thankfully, that's changed a ton in the last couple of years, but I thought it was kind of depressing. So we really filled the gap, and now 4 years later, we have over 150,000 readers a month from all around the world. So we're really, really happy about it. Unfortunately, that leaves us open to a lot of hate mail, which I can tell you guys all about during the Q&A if you're interested. It's pretty funny. But in any case, we wanted to create a site that showed feminism for what it was, that it's political and that it's about activism, of course, but also that it's fun and that it's edgy and that it's cool. So we try to cover a mix of issues. You know, we cover serious issues, some not so serious. This was because this conservative commenter, Debbie Schlessel, wrote a whole post about if you have a tattoo, you're a whore. I think, what did she say? Yeah, women who agree to repeatedly put a needle in her body, it's not long before they agree to put other things in their body. So I decided to take a picture of my tattoo and demonstrate why I guess I am a slut too. I don't know. And also, of course, since we're here talking about NARAL, pro-choice Montana reproductive rights, we cover a lot of reproductive rights and justice issues. It takes up a tremendous part of our blogging. And we try to cover local issues, like whether it's a law in South Dakota. We also try to cover national issues or kind of more analytical views. This is a piece from one of our writers, Anne, who wrote about how during her youth and she was growing up, she was kind of indoctrinated into the anti-choice frame of mind, and how she feels that a lot of the very young people that you see protesting outside of clinics, like we're talking very young, they don't really have a concept of what the argument is all about. And also, what's great about the reproductive justice coverage that we do is that I think it kind of shows how blogging is not just snarky commentary, that it's also about activism. So for example, this year, Feministing, those of us in New York, we're kind of all around the country, partnered with New York-based pro-choice organizations to throw a big row party. Not as a fundraiser, not as anything like whatever, we just wanted to get together and like pat each other on the back and say, good to go. Another one of my favorite all-time stories of online activism is about reproductive choice. A couple of years ago, a lawmaker in Virginia put forward a bill that basically said any woman who has a miscarriage has to report it to the police, like call 911, report it to the police in the first 12 hours, or she could be arrested for failure to report a death. Which is so incredibly insensitive to women who have had miscarriages, but obviously it was part of a larger anti-choice agenda. When people got wind of this, and you know, he kind of did it on the sly, like a couple of people locally got wind of it, they sent it to some feminist bloggers. Bloggers went crazy. They went crazy and they emailed his office and they, you know, encouraged their readers to email his office. And a couple of weeks later, he pulled the bill. And he actually credited being blogged as part of it. He was actually quite whiny about it and was like, this is horrible, I can't believe people would do that to me. I'm like, I don't really have that much sympathy for you at all. And of course, sometimes blogging is just about snarky commentary, and one of my favorite things to be snarky about is abstinence-only education, because the jokes kind of just really write themselves. I don't know if you guys can see what that says. It's something like every time, I can't read it from here, a beautiful rose, every time you pluck a flower, don't give your husband a bare stem, you know, because only women are supposed to abstain, because, you know, it's only our virginity that matters, I suppose. But the point being, we found that writing in this way, that being funny, that being informal, and that getting personal really does reach out to younger women in an amazing way. And sometimes it's even subversive. I apologize if you've heard this story before, because I love to tell it. There was a 15-year-old girl who ended up on Feministing because she did a Google search on Jessica Simpson. And we had written about Jessica Simpson taking her virginity pledge to her dad and how creepy that was and all this kind of stuff. And she ended up on the site and she kind of like poked around and emailed us and said, you know, I had no idea this is what feminism was about. I thought that feminism, you know, was about hating men and having hairy legs and burning your, like all of the things that we've been talking about. And she stuck around and now she's one of our regular commenters. And we get emails like this all the time, and it's just amazing. And it's really those emails that made me want to write my book, Full Frontal Feminism. When I thought of writing the book, I really wanted to put something out there that was informal and accessible, that not only dispelled all of these ridiculous anti-feminist myths, but that showed how fun activism can be, and that showed how feminism can actually make your own personal life better. So I thought I would just take a second to read from the book, since I'm all about some shameless self-promotion. And we're talking about Roe and abstinence and choice, I thought I would read from the sex chapter where I talk a little bit about abstinence-only education, and the title of it is called, the subtitle, You're a Dirty Lollipop. And it will become clear why that is the subtitle in a minute. Nothing freaks me out / pisses me off more than abstinence-only education. Basically, it's the most naive form of sex education you can get. Sex is bad, don't have it until you're married, contraception doesn't work. Somehow educators think this will convince kids not to have sex. Compare that to comprehensive sex education that teaches abstinence, but also makes sure that teens have medically correct information about contraception, STDs, and the like. It's reality-based sex ed that understands that no matter how many scare tactics you throw at people, they're still going to do what they want. This isn't to say that I think holding off on sex is bad. Abstain all you want, ladies. But if you're holding off, do it because you're waiting to have sex on your own terms. And don't not have sex because you think you're worthless if you do, which is exactly what these classes are saying. As it stands now, the government is spending $178 million a year to tell young women they're whores, if they give it up, and various other untruths. Most abstinence-only education programs give out false information about sex, all of it sexist, most of it bordering on the ridiculous. The medical misinformation is not just untrue, it's straight up dangerous. For example, these programs teach that not only that condoms don't protect you from pregnancy or STDs, but that they can cause cancer. And that's actually something that one program was teaching. After kids are exposed to this bullshit, they're less likely to use contraception because it doesn't work anyway, right? Because of abstinence-only education, we're going to have a generation of sexual dum-dums. It seems unfathomable, but somehow teaching the truth about sex and contraception is just too scary for some folks. Conservatives and right-wing religious groups think it's going to make us all slutty. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit, and I talk a little bit about some of the actual curricula in these classes. One program teaches that women need financial support, while men need admiration. There's a quote. I love these so much. Women gauge their happiness and judge their success on their relationships. Men's happiness and success hinge on their accomplishments. Yeah, I'll just let that one sit for a bit. Another program tells a faux fairy tale that isn't so much about sex as it's about how women need to keep their mouths shut. It's in a book using abstinence curricula, Choosing the Best, and it tells the story of a knight who saves a princess from a dragon. They're very original. When the knight arrives to save her, the princess offers some ideas on how to kill the dragon. Her ideas work, but the knight feels emasculated. So he goes off and marries a village maiden, quote, only after making sure she knew nothing about nooses or poison. The curriculum concludes, with the moral of the story, and this is a quote, occasional suggestions and assistance may be all right, but too much of them will lessen a man's confidence or even turn him away from his princess. Hear that, gals? If you let on that you're smart, your prince on the white horse is likely to run scared. Abstinence programs are also huge fans of making sex the ladies' responsibility. It's up to us to make sure it doesn't happen because guys just can't help themselves. One program actually advises girls, watch what you wear. If you don't aim to please, don't aim to tease. The liberation movement, which I suppose is us, has produced some aggressive girls. And one of the tough challenges for guys who say no will be the questioning of their manliness. And because females generally become aroused less easily, they're in a good position to help young men learn balance in relationships by keeping intimacy in perspective. It seems that girls don't get horny, so it's up to us to make sure that the sex doesn't happen, and if it does, well, you should have kept your legs closed, you big dummy. But really and truly, the following gem is my favorite. It comes from an educator, and I put educator in scare quotes because it just pains me to call him that. Speaking at an abstinence conference in 2006, your body is a wrapped lollipop. When you have, and this is something that's only directed at the women, by the way, when you have sex with a man, he unwraps your lollipop and sucks on it. It may feel great at the time, but unfortunately, when he's all done with you, all you have left for your next partner is a poorly wrapped, saliva-fouled sucker. Is that clear enough for you? Without your precious lollipop, you're a piece of shit, dirty ass, already sucked on candy. Which is supposedly why you have to hold on to your most precious commodity, your virginity. And there's this little subsection called our hymens ourselves. Forgive me. I've never really understood what the big deal was about virginity, really. Mine was lost without a great deal of fanfare to a high school boyfriend whom I dated for several years afterward. I expected to feel different, I didn't. And the whole precious flower virginity thing always seemed silly to me. So imagine my surprise when I found out that I was just a used-up piece of trash, or candy, without it. Remember how back in the day your virginity was a valuable commodity and your purity was pretty much what your dad banked on to get a good price for you when you got married? You think that's all in the past? Not even close. One of the most disturbing stories I've heard of was about Jessica Simpson and her dad, Joe. I talk about Jessica Simpson way too much. A gossip mag reported that during a ceremony when Jessica was 12 years old, Joe made her promise to stay a virgin until marriage. Wait, it gets worse. Jessica's dad, who is also her manager, gave her a promise ring and said, "I'm going to tell you how beautiful you are every day, and I'm going to be that person until you find a man to do that in my place." If you're like me, you're probably in the fetal position on the floor right now trying to make that image go away. But this isn't unusual. There are virginity cards, rings, ceremonies, you name it. And of course, I wrote this before kind of the upsurgence of purity balls. I don't know if you guys know about that. We can talk about that during the Q&A. They are terrifying. The one thing they all have in common is that girls' virginity and sexuality doesn't belong to themselves. Not only are virginity pledges so creepy and wrong, they're not exactly effective. Recent studies have shown that teens who take virginity pledges are actually more likely to have oral and anal sex. Their logic is because it's not intercourse, it's not real sex. Somehow I don't think the folks who made up the whole pledge thing had sodomy in mind. You would think the idea of good Christian girls taking it in the ass would motivate some change in the whole pledge system, but they're sticking to their guns. So that's generally where I like to end, as to not get myself in too much trouble. So as you can see, that gives you an idea of the tone of the book. And yes, it is potty-mouthed. I am a bit potty-mouthed. But it was important to me to write a book that was informal and conversational and was accurate to kind of like how I talk to people every day. Because I really do believe that if we tell the truth about feminism, if we're funny about it, if we talk to young women rather than talking at them, that they'd embrace feminism. And that's not to say that I think that all young women need to become professional feminists or professional feminist activists. I like to say a lot, you can be a feminist without being an activist. You know, you don't need to go out, and I hear this from young women a lot, well, I'm not a feminist because I don't go to protests. Like, you don't need to go to a protest to be a feminist. You can make feminism a part of your everyday life, and that makes you a feminist. So I thought that I would leave you with a couple of cool stories of young women who are taking feminist action, but not necessarily dedicating their lives to the movement. Some of you may have heard about this if you read Feministing. A group of high school girls in Pennsylvania organized what they called a girlcott instead of a boycott of Abercrombie & Fitch when the clothing company came out with girl shirts that said, "Who needs brains when you have these?" and other ridiculous shirts. After the group caused a real ruckus in the media, they got a lot of media attention, Abercrombie & Fitch pulled the shirts, and they actually invited the girls to come in for a meeting to help them design new shirts. While I was doing this, I came across these gems, by the way. These are shirts that are still out there, and these are in catalogs that are directed to girls who are 10 to 14, just so you know. So if anyone wants to organize another girl cut against Delia's or Alloy, that's where these come from. Delia's on the left, Alloy on the right. That's, yeah, I'm tight like spandex. It's charming. Two women from Brooklyn started a service to help prevent sexual assaults. This is actually in my old neighborhood in Brooklyn. There was a rash of rapes in the neighborhood against women who were walking home from bars late at night. So what they did was they used their own money and they started an organization called Right Rides. Women can call them anytime from midnight to 4 a.m. on the weekends and get a ride home. And their motto is because getting home safe shouldn't be a luxury. And this, by far, is my favorite, and I love to show it, I think, only because of the picture. A woman at Portland State University decided to start a rock and roll camp for girls as part of a class project. She expected about 20 girls to show up, and 300 signed up. Yeah. So rock and roll camp is awesome. I actually support the one that's in New York City. They teach girls to play instruments, to sing, to DJ, to write songs. And at the end of the whole experience, they have a big show at like a local rock club. And it's just amazing. The camp was so popular in Oregon that there are now rock camps in New York, in Washington, D.C., Nashville, Tucson, and a whole bunch of places in California. And this is really just a small sample of the work that young women are doing, because there's a ton out there, and we certainly try to report on it as much as we can. And I mention these women just to make the point that not only is feminism alive and well, but it's fun and it's energized. And despite what the media may tell you or what stereotypes may tell you, young women are doing feminist work every single day. And we're out there and we're doing it. Before I know that we're going to go into some questions, talking about feminist work, I want to mention again NARAL Pro Choice Montana and the amazing work that they do. I know that this is a free event. There's a basket outside if anyone would like to donate some funds. Please consider it. And I think we're going to questions. Yes? Someone's coming up. But thanks. I'm just going to leave that on there so we can all enjoy little girls rocking out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
You can use this one if you want. You got it? You can shout it.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Well, thank you. That was a really good speech. We really enjoyed it. Here's one question from the audience. Have you seen the movie Juno? And if so, how should feminists view the main character's delusion to have her baby and give up for adoption versus abortion?
I thought Juno was an incredibly feminist movie. How many people have seen it? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, then I don't feel too bad about. Well, I guess they gave it away. I thought it was an incredible movie, and I thought it was very feminist, and I thought that she was a smart young woman who made the decision that she wanted to make. So I know that there's been a bunch of kind of controversy in the feminist world about, well, if she was so smart and so witty, she, would have chosen an abortion. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. Like, she was like a quirky, odd girl in the movie who, wanted to make the decision for herself, and I thought it was a very feminist movie. Do you guys agree or not agree? Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, the only criticism I've heard that I kind of related to was that, well, if she was so smart and like so amazing, she probably would have had protected sex, which is true, but whatevs. It's a movie. That's what they needed the movie for.
Why do you think young women typically do not identify themselves as feminists?
Sure. I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit. I think it's really the word that scares them, and how good conservatives have been and how good the media has been in really destroying the word. And some people have asked me, well, maybe we can just like do away with the word entirely. If young women are doing the work and they believe in the issues, then who cares? I care. I think it's incredibly important that women identify as feminists, because even if you're out there doing the work and you're kind of doing feminist work in your community without necessarily identifying it as feminist, if you identify as a feminist, you're a part of a larger community. All of a sudden you can meet all these other women who are doing different kinds of feminist work who call themselves feminists. So I'm kind of sticking to trying to bring the word back.
Right. What advice do you have for men interested in being active in feminism?
Do it. I don't think that there's, I don't think there's any big, great controversy over men being involved. I think that there was some concern back in the day over if men got involved that they would take over, that there wouldn't be, well, it happens, that there wouldn't be women's leadership in the same way that there has been. So I even know guys who, instead of calling themselves feminists, will call themselves pro-feminist, so that they're not kind of like taking the word away from women, so that it's a woman-identified word, but that they're showing that their support and their solidarity with feminist issues. Frankly, I don't care. They can call themselves whatever they want, so long as they're doing the work. I have plenty of male allies, and I think it's incredibly important. I don't think that we can do it without them.
All right, this one just says purity ball, and it has 3 question marks and an underline.
Okay, purity balls. I wish I could pull up, we have like some videos of purity balls. Does anyone know what purity balls are? Only a couple people. Oh my God, amazing. So, purity balls started in Colorado Springs a couple of years ago, and basically what they are like a prom-like event, kind of like a big dance. It's a father-daughter dance, and fathers take their daughters as young as 6 up to like adults, and the girls like get dressed up in like super like prom hair and like makeup, and they look like, when you see the pictures, they look like little wives. Like it's a very disturbing visual. And what they do when they get there, amidst all the dancing and hanging out with dad, is they pledge their virginity to their fathers. And in a way, they pledge their virginity to their fathers, and they say they hand their fathers a pink box with like a little like lock and key thing in it, and they do that, and then the fathers recite a pledge back to them saying, I am like the keeper of your purity, and until I decide to give it to the next man. I mean, it's really horrific. If you can go on YouTube and watch the videos, I highly recommend it because it will freak you out. Also, they're federally funded. Yeah. Through abstinence-only education money, that's where they get their funds. It's really unbelievable. And when people started to complain, well, why are there no mother-son purity balls? They started something called an integrity ball. Now, the interesting thing about the integrity ball is that it's not about giving ownership to your virginity to your mother, because that would be ridiculous, right? It's about the pledge says, I will not, like the guy says, I will not have sex before marriage because that would be defiling someone's future wife. That would be defiling someone's daughter. So it's actually that you're doing damage to someone else's property. That's the issue there. So yeah, I could talk about purity balls all night. They're really so unbelievable, and so like when you watch the videos, they're so like pseudo-incestuous that it's very, very, very creepy. Was that it? Did that explain them well?
All right. Can you describe feminism in one sentence? There are all types of feminists: Amazon, libertarian, moderate.
Yes.
And do you identify with a particular one? Also, who do you think is the most iconic feminist? That's like, I know, 3.
Wow, that's intense. The definition of feminism I go by, and the one that I use in my book for kind of strategic political reasons, is, it's social, political, and economic equality for women. And I use that because it's the definition that the least amount of people can argue with me about. Because who doesn't want that? I kind of, as someone who went to graduate school for feminism, I certainly studied a lot of the different kinds of feminist theory, and I've kind of identified with a lot of them along the way. But at the end of the day, it's all activism to me, and that was kind of, and it's one of the reasons why I actually left grad school, and that was important for me to write this book in the way that I wrote it, because I kept thinking about how academic feminism had gotten, and how, I mean, women's studies was great, and I loved going to grad school for it, don't get me wrong, but there came a point, a big part of the reason why I got involved in feminism was because of my mother. My mother didn't graduate high school. So when there came a point, and I had to come home with like Judith Butler or some like very dense feminist theory that I couldn't discuss with her, it kind of ceased to be useful to me in my own activism. And that's part of the reason why I thought it was important to write a book that was accessible to people no matter what their level of political engagement or no matter what their education level. And iconic feminists, I would say, I mean, I think everyone thinks of Gloria Steinem, and that's not to say that like I think of her as the greatest feminist ever, but I think that that's who the mainstream media picked out for very specific reasons, because of the way she looked, obviously, was a part of it. And I think that's what most people think of when they think of feminists. Am I wrong? I mean, isn't that the first feminist? And I don't necessarily think that's, because I think there's been a ton of feminist theorists and activists who have probably done more for the movement than Gloria Steinem has. But I think that the media chooses their icons in a very particular way.
Great. How do you encourage intergenerational dialogue amongst feminists?
This is hard. We've been getting a lot of stuff on the site lately with the elections coming up. There's been some generational tension. We try to talk to On the site, we say on the site that we're a site by and for young women, but most of our readers are not. I mean, they're kind of all over the map age-wise, and I think that the work we do on the site kind of fosters intergenerational dialogue in that way. The great thing about blogging and about writing for a blog is that, the comment section, and the comment section is always very lively, and there's people of all ages and colors and religions kind of like hashing it out in this really, really great way. And I think that just by having a forum that's out there that kind of puts out what we think about feminism and how we're feeling about the issues, and lets older feminists or younger feminists in on it, I think that's kind of the best thing we can do. I know that myself, I've had some, as I've mentioned, some tensions or some differences of opinion with kind of the mainstream feminist movement and the national organizations, which are traditionally headed up by older, well-known feminists. But I think that's a whole other story. I think it's kind of trying to figure out how far institutional feminism can go without recognizing all the work being done locally on the ground at the grassroots level, and without kind of taking an intersectional analysis of sexism, so that it's not just about getting a woman elected president. It's not just about sexism, it's about racism and classism and homophobia. And I think that the people who are doing that best are the people who are working in small organizations on the ground. That was a much longer answer than you needed for that question. But.
All right. And for our last question, this question says, would Hillary Clinton receive the turnout she does if she were a Republican? Or do feminism and liberalism/leftism go hand in hand?
No, I think people are misogynist no matter what political. I think that it wouldn't matter. I think that people are just misogynist. I think at the end of the day, she has a vagina, and that's enough for people not to vote for her. I don't think that it has anything to do with how lefty or not lefty she is. Frankly, I may be wrong, but I've seen. This campaign has brought out so much misogyny, so much and not from the usual suspects and the people you would expect from the mainstream media in incredible ways, from friends, from people I talk to, just seeing the incredible amounts of sexism and what kind of Hillary and I think women's leadership and women's political leadership brings out in people. It's really kind of insane and intense. But I'd like to think that things like blogs who are holding the mainstream media accountable are kind of doing that work of trying to make it less acceptable. Was that the last one?
Yeah. So let's give another thank you to Jessica Valenti and her wonderful talk.
There's books in the thing. Okay.